On my 42nd birthday, a single message on my phone would change my life forever. Your colleague David and I fell in love. I'm selling my shares in the company, and we're starting a new life together. This was the message I received from my wife. Because there was something Emma didn't know, the real purpose of the document she had signed. My name is Robert Harrison. I'm the CEO of TechnoVision, a software company I founded with my university friend David Miller 2 years ago. Or at least I was until my wife and colleague stabbed me in the back. The morning of my birthday had started like any other day. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., careful not to disturb Emma, who was still asleep beside me. The distance between us on the king-size bed had grown over the past months, a physical manifestation of our emotional separation. I slipped out from under the Egyptian cotton sheet she had insisted on buying during our trip to London last year, a time when things were still somewhat normal between us. I made my way to the kitchen of our 3-bedroom apartment in the upscale Riverside neighborhood. The apartment had floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline and the river that curved through it like a silver snake. The morning light was just beginning to break, casting a golden glow over the glass and steel structures that made up the city's financial district where both our offices were located. I prepared myself a strong black coffee, a habit I had developed during my university days when I was working on my first software project with David. The coffee machine, a state-of-the-art Italian model that Emma had brought home one day, hummed quietly as it dispensed the aromatic brew. The familiar scent of coffee filled the kitchen, providing a brief moment of comfort in what had become an increasingly uncomfortable home life. As I took my first sip, I reflected on the last few years. TechnoVision had been my dream since I wrote my first line of code at the age of 14. I had spent countless nights perfecting our payment system, ensuring it was not only secure but also user-friendly. The hard work had paid off when a major investment group approached us 6 months ago with an offer that had taken my breath away, $20 million. I checked my watch, 6:15 a.m. I had a meeting with our development team at 8 a.m. to discuss the integration of our new security protocols. I took a shower, dressed in my usual attire of dark jeans and a button-up shirt, and left a note for Emma on the kitchen counter. We'll be home late. Don't wait up. It was our new normal. Communication reduced to brief notes and text messages. The drive to the office took 20 minutes. TechnoVision's headquarters were located in a renovated warehouse in the Tech District, an area that had once been industrial but had now been transformed into a hub for startups and tech companies. I had chosen the location for its character and affordable rent when we first started, but now, with the investment, we were considering moving to a more prestigious address in the financial district. As I pulled into my designated parking spot, I noticed David's car was already there. He had been coming in earlier and leaving later for the past few months, something he attributed to his increased responsibilities after the investment. I made a mental note to check in with him about his workload. The office was quiet when I entered. Most of our 30 employees would arrive between 8 o'clock and 9 a.m. I greeted our security guard, an older gentleman named Howard who had been with us since day one, and made my way to my office. I was engrossed in reviewing the latest financial reports when my phone buzzed with a message notification. It was 10:30 a.m., and I hadn't realized how much time had passed. I expected it to be Emma, perhaps with a perfunctory birthday wish, but the content of the message made my blood run cold. Robert, I've been trying to find the right way to tell you this for weeks. Your colleague David and I fell in love. I'm selling my shares in the company, and we're starting a new life together. I'm sorry it had to be this way. Emma. I read the message again, then a third time, my mind refusing to process the words. The phone slipped from my hand onto the desk with a clatter. For a moment, everything was still. Then a surge of emotions hit me: disbelief, betrayal, anger, pain. Each feeling crashed over me like waves in a storm, threatening to drown me. I looked through the glass wall of my office toward David's empty chair. He was supposed to be in a meeting with potential clients, but now I wondered if that was true. The thought of my wife and my best friend, my business partner, betraying me in the most intimate way possible was a knife twisting in my gut. But beneath the emotional storm, something else stirred, a cold, calculating part of me that had always been there, the part that had helped me build TechnoVision from the ground up. Because Emma's message contained a crucial mistake. She could not sell her shares in the company, not without my consent. And there was something else she didn't know, something I had done 6 months ago when my suspicions were first aroused. I picked up my phone and sent a brief text to my lawyer, Michael Thompson. Need to meet urgently. It's happening. Then I leaned back in my chair and began to plan my next move. The game had changed, but I was far from defeated. In fact, I had been preparing for this moment longer than either Emma or David realized. Our story really began 3 years ago, with a major turning point for our company, TechnoVision. The payment system we had developed in the fintech sector had caught the attention of a major investment group. There was a $20 million investment offer on the table, one that would allow us to expand our operations and take our business to the next level. David and I had been friends since our days at the university. We had started our software company with nothing but a shared vision and determination. We had worked together for 2 years, surviving on instant noodles and sleeping on office couches, growing the company step by step. We had complementary skills. I was a technical genius, the coder, the visionary. David was a business mind, the smooth talker, the one who closed the deals and handled the financial aspects. The day the investment offer was finalized, champagne was popped in the office, and celebrations were in full swing. The team was ecstatic, seeing their hard work finally paying off. I remember looking at their jubilant faces, feeling a surge of pride and responsibility. These people had trusted in my vision, and I was determined not to let them down. But amidst the celebration, I couldn't shake off a nagging feeling of unease. The investment meant changes in the company's structure, changes in how we operated, changes in the dynamics between David and me. I was a control freak. I knew that. Relinquishing even a small part of that control was difficult for me. But I also knew it was necessary for the growth of the company. That evening, I came home late, the effect of the champagne still buzzing in my veins. Emma was reading a book in bed, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, the bedside lamp casting a warm glow on her face. She put her book aside when I walked in, a small smile playing on her lips. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice soft. "Great," I said, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face. "They are signing the deal. $20 million. Her eyes sparkled with a mixture of pride and excitement. Emma and I had been married for 7 years. I had met her at a startup event where she was representing her law firm. She was a young lawyer specializing in technology law, and she had approached me after my presentation to discuss a point I had made about data privacy. She was smart, articulate, and not intimidated by my technical jargon. I had been immediately attracted to her confidence and intelligence. We had started dating shortly after, and within a year, we were married. The early years of our marriage had been blissful. Despite the long hours I worked on establishing TechnoVision, we had managed to build a life together. We spent weekends exploring the city, went on spontaneous trips, and enjoyed simple pleasures like cooking together or watching movies. But lately, something had changed. The spark had dimmed, the conversations had become superficial, and the silences had grown longer. I had attributed it to the stress of the company's growth and the pressures it put on both of us. Emma had her own career to focus on, and I was often too absorbed in TechnoVision to notice her growing detachment. "We should celebrate," said Emma, reaching out to hug me. Her arms around me felt warm, familiar, yet somehow different. That night, we drank wine and made love, the passion temporarily bridging the gap that had grown between us. It was as if the coldness, the distance of the past months, had never existed. As I held her close afterward, I made a silent promise to make things right, to find a way to revive our relationship. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find David already there, a broad smile on his face. He was more jubilant than I had seen him in months, his eyes bright with excitement. At the time, I attributed his joy to the investment deal, to the validation of our hard work and vision. Now, looking back, I wonder if there was another reason for his unusual cheerfulness. Over the next 6 months, the dynamics in our company began to change after the big investment deal. David wanted more responsibility, especially over financial controls. While I focused on the product development and the technical aspects of the business, he took over the financial phase. At the time, it made sense. We were partners, and I trusted him implicitly. We had been through the trenches together, had seen each other at our best and worst. He had always been there, supporting me, offering a different perspective when I got too caught up in the technicalities. His business acumen had been instrumental in the growth of TechnoVision, and I was more than happy to let him handle the financial aspects while I focused on what I did best. But looking back, I realized that this division of responsibilities had created a blind spot, a vulnerability that I had failed to see. Meanwhile, things were changing at home as well. Emma began to take more interest in the company, asking about the legal structure, the status of the investment, the management decisions. As a lawyer specializing in technology law, she was certainly an expert in these details, but she had never shown this level of interest before. She had always respected the boundary between our personal and professional lives. "I just want to help," she would say whenever I expressed surprise at a sudden interest. "To ensure your legal security." With Emma's guidance, we restructured the company shares. I retained 60% of the shares, while David owned 40%. It was a distribution that reflected our respective contributions to the company. I had provided the initial idea, the technological innovation, while David had brought in the business expertise and many of our initial clients. One evening, as we were reviewing the new structure, Emma suggested a change. "You should give me 10% of your shares in my name," she said, her tone casual, as if she was suggesting we try a new restaurant. I looked up from the documents, surprised. "Why?" "So I have a say in any emergency," she said, placing a hand on my arm. "It's just a precaution. Robert, you never know what might happen." It seemed reasonable at the time. Emma was my wife, my partner in life. We were supposed to share everything, and having a lawyer's perspective on the board could only be beneficial for the company. I signed the papers without a second thought, transferring 10% of my shares to Emma's name. As company operations continued under the new structure, my meetings with David began to grow more tense. We disagreed on business strategies, on the direction the company should take. He wanted faster growth, more aggressive investments, taking on bigger clients even if they stretched our resources. I preferred a more cautious approach, solidifying our position with our current clients, ensuring our technology was robust before expanding. "We have the investment now. Robert," he would argue, "we need to make the most of it. Show our investors that their money is being put to good use." "I understand that, David," I would respond, "but we also need to make sure we're delivering quality. We need to honor our commitments to our existing clients before we take on new ones." These disagreements, which had once been productive discussions leading to better decisions, now felt more like power struggles. Each meeting left me more frustrated, more convinced that David was pushing an agenda that wasn't aligned with my vision for TechnoVision. As tension increased in the office, my relationship at home also began to cool. Emma was working late hours more frequently, claiming high-profile cases that demanded her attention. She would come home exhausted, barely having energy for conversation, let alone intimacy. Weekends, which we had once reserved for each other, were now filled with girls' nights out and work emergencies. She had password-protected her phone, something she had never done before. She was guarded about her messages, turning away when I was nearby. One night, she came home late, the subtle scent of perfume clinging to her clothes. Not the perfume I had given her on our last anniversary, but something different, something I didn't recognize. When I asked her about it, she dismissed it casually, claiming it was a new fragrance a colleague had let her try. I'm a technology expert. Spying on people, reading their messages, checking their emails, these were things I could easily do if I wanted to. But I didn't want to invade Emma's privacy, to become the kind of husband who spies on his wife. I still respected her, still wanted to believe in our relationship, but I also wasn't naive. The signs were there, and I couldn't ignore them. Something was wrong, and I needed to know what it was. So I began to gather information, not by hacking into her accounts or tracking her movements, but by paying attention, by connecting the dots. And I began to prepare for the worst. One crisp morning in October, as the autumn leaves painted the city in hues of red and gold, I was reviewing the company's financial records, something I had started doing more regularly as my trust in David waned. It was a tedious task, going through pages of numbers and transactions, but it was necessary. I needed to understand what was happening with our company's finances, especially since the investment had significantly increased our operating capital. As I was going through the records, something caught my attention. In the past 3 months, large amounts of money had been transferred to a company called Freedom Co. for consulting services. A total of $450,000 had been paid out in 3 equal installments. The name didn't ring any bells. I had never heard of this company, had never approved any contract with them. I checked our client database, our vendor list, our partnerships. Freedom Co. was not listed anywhere. This was unusual. As the CEO, I was generally aware of all major contracts and partnerships, even if I wasn't involved in the day-to-day operations. I decided to ask David directly. I called him into my office, keeping my tone casual, not wanting to reveal my suspicions just yet. David, I was going through the financial records and noticed payments to a company called Freedom Co. What's that about? David didn't miss a beat. It's a new cybersecurity measure, he said, his expression neutral. They are specialists in penetration testing and security audits. They work closely with the IT teams to identify vulnerabilities in our system. It sounded plausible. After the investment, we had prioritized cybersecurity, given the sensitive nature of our payment system. But something about his explanation didn't sit right with me. The amount seemed excessive for a security audit, and I would have expected the IT department to be more involved if it was indeed a cybersecurity measure. Which IT team are they working with? I asked, keeping my tone conversational. Matthew's team primarily, David replied. They've been focusing on the new security protocol for the payment system. I nodded, making a mental note to check with our IT head, Matthew, about this. Sounds interesting. I'd like to see their reports. Could you forward them to me? A flicker of something, discomfort, worry, crossed David's face, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Of course, he said smoothly. I'll have them sent over to you today. But no reports arrived that day, or the next. When I prompted David again, he claimed he was having trouble accessing them and would get them to me as soon as possible. I decided to dig deeper. That afternoon, I called Matthew, our IT head, to my office. Matthew had been with us almost from the beginning, a meticulous professional who had built our IT infrastructure from the ground up. He was loyal, dedicated, and most importantly, honest. Matthew, I began once he was seated across from me. Are you working with a company called Freedom Co. on our security protocols? Matthew's brow furrowed in confusion. Freedom Co.? No, not that I'm aware of. Who are they? I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. David had lied, outright lied, to me. Apparently, they're a cybersecurity firm we've hired. David mentioned they're working closely with your team on penetration testing and security audits. Matthew shook his head, his confusion evident. Mr. Harrison, I assure you we're not involved with any such company. Our security audits are being conducted by CyberShield, as approved by the board last quarter. I thanked Matthew for his candor and asked him to keep our conversation confidential, not wanting to spread any potential controversy within the company until I had more concrete information. That night, on my way home, I decided to approach Emma. Perhaps she knew something about this mysterious company, given her involvement in the legal aspects of our business. Emma, I asked as casually as I could, had you ever come across a company called Freedom Co. in relation to our business? Or do you know anyone named Oliver? Emma's reaction was subtle but noticeable. A slight tensing of her shoulders, a brief break in her eye contact, a flush creeping up her neck. No, she said quickly, too quickly. Why do you ask? Just curious, I said, pretending to be absorbed in my laptop. David mentioned something about them handling our cybersecurity measures. Him, she said, her tone deliberately casual as she continued to examine her phone. Interesting. Her reaction confirmed my suspicions. Emma knew something, and she was hiding it from me. The coldness in the pit of my stomach spread, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air and everything to do with the realization that the two people closest to me were keeping secrets, possibly conspiring against me. The next day, I went to my bank and arranged a separate account, one that David had no access to. Without explaining to David, I transferred a significant portion of my personal savings to this account. It was a precautionary measure, a way to protect myself financially if things went south. Later, I launched a secret investigation into Freedom Co., determined to uncover the truth behind this mysterious company and its connection to my wife and business partner. I hired a private investigator, a former police detective named Marcus Reynolds. I had met Marcus through a mutual friend a few years ago and had remained in occasional contact. He was discreet, thorough, and most importantly, he was not connected to either Emma or David, reducing the risk of my investigation being discovered. Marcus began his investigation immediately, promising to be thorough but discreet. Meanwhile, I continued to act normal, not wanting to alert either David or Emma to my suspicions. A week later, Marcus called me with his findings. Mr. Harrison, I've got some information about Freedom Co. that you might find interesting. Go ahead, I said, stepping out of the office to take the call in private. Freedom Co. was established 6 months ago, right around the time your company received the investment. Marcus began. The sole shareholder is a man named Oliver Kent. The name meant nothing to me, but the timing was suspicious. Who is Oliver Kent? That's the interesting part, Marcus continued. Oliver Kent doesn't seem to exist. The address listed for him is a P.O. box, and the social security number provided in the company registration documents doesn't match any records. It's a fake identity. The knot in my stomach tightened. What about the company's office? Listed as Suite 1203, Riverside Tower, Canary Wharf. It's a high-end office building. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my mind racing. There's one more thing I'd like you to check. What's that? Could you look into any connections between Freedom Co. and either David Miller or Emma Harrison? I'll see what I can find, Marcus promised. The next day, I decided to visit the office of Freedom Co. myself. I told my assistant I had a personal matter to attend to and would be out of the office for a few hours. The Riverside Tower was a gleaming skyscraper in Canary Wharf, home to many prestigious companies. I asked the security guard at the reception about Freedom Co. 12th floor, Suite 1203, he said after checking a directory. I took the elevator to the 12th floor. The hallway was plush, with cream-colored walls and tasteful artwork. A discreet sign next to the door of Suite 1203 read Freedom Co. I knocked, but there was no answer. I tried the handle. Surprisingly, the door was unlocked. I entered cautiously, not knowing what to expect. What I found was a stark contrast to the luxurious hallway outside. The office was nearly empty. No furniture, except for a solitary desk and chair. No employees, no signs of activity. The only object on the desk was a laptop, its screen dark. The space had the feel of a stage set, a facade meant to give the impression of legitimate business while hiding its true nature. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures of the empty office, careful not to leave any traces of my visit. As I left the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of uncovering something significant, something that would change everything. When I returned to my office, I had a message waiting from Marcus. Call me when you can. I have important information. I stepped outside again to take the call. Marcus, what have you found? Mr. Harrison, I've traced the financial transactions of Freedom Co. The money from your company is being routed through several offshore accounts before ending up in a personal account under the name of David Miller. I felt as if I had been punched in the gut, but I wasn't entirely surprised. The evidence had been pointing in this direction. Thank you, Marcus. Can you provide documentation of this? I've sent it to your secure email as requested. Be careful, Mr. Harrison. This is serious fraud. I thanked Marcus again and ended the call, my mind racing. David was embezzling company funds, using a fake company as a front. But what was Emma's role in all this? Was she aware of the fraud? Was she involved? The thought of my wife being complicit in such a scheme was devastating, but I couldn't ignore the possibility. I spent the rest of the day going through the documentation Marcus had sent me, making notes, building a case. The evidence was compelling. David had been systematically siphoning off company funds, using Freedom Co. as a conduit. But there was still no clear link to Emma, no evidence of her involvement. As I made my way home that evening, earlier than usual, I was determined to confront Emma, to get the truth from her. But as I approached our apartment, a sense of dread settled over me. What would I find? What if my worst fears were confirmed? Little did I know that the answers to these questions were waiting for me behind our door, and they would be even more devastating than I had imagined. I entered our apartment quietly, not wanting to announce my presence just yet. The sound of voices, hushed but animated, came from our bedroom. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. I could discern two distinct voices, a woman's and a man's. Emma's voice, and a voice that I recognized with a sinking feeling in my chest. I moved silently through the living room, careful not to make a sound. As I approached the bedroom door, the voices became clearer. "We can't keep this up much longer. David," Emma was saying, her voice tense. "Robert is getting suspicious. He asked about Freedom Co. yesterday." My heart pounded in my chest. It was one thing to suspect, another to have it confirmed in such a brutal way. "He doesn't know anything," David's voice replied, dismissive. "He's too wrapped up in his code to notice what's happening right under his nose. Besides, by the time he figures it out, we'll be long gone." But what if he checks the accounts? What if he finds out about the missing money? He won't. I've covered our tracks well, and with your shares in the company, we have leverage. I had heard enough. With a surge of anger, I pushed open the bedroom door. The scene that greeted me was one I had both expected and dreaded. Emma and David, in our bed, their expressions frozen in shock at my unexpected arrival. "Robert!" Emma exclaimed, her face draining of color. "What are you doing here?" "In my own home," I asked, my voice eerily calm despite the storm raging inside me. "I think the real question is, what is David doing here?" David scrambled to put on his shirt, his movements frantic. "Robert, listen, I can explain." "I'm sure it's a fascinating explanation," I said, the sarcasm in my voice cutting like a knife. "Does it also include an explanation about Freedom Co.?" The look of shock on their faces was all the confirmation I needed. They had been caught, not just in their affair, but in their scheming as well. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my gaze moving between the two of them, these two people who had been the closest to me, who had betrayed me in the most personal and professional ways possible. Emma's eyes dropped to the floor, unable to meet my gaze. 6 months, she admitted, her voice barely audible. "It just happened." "Nothing just happened for 6 months, Emma," I said, my voice cold. "And the company money? Where's the $450,000 that has mysteriously disappeared into Freedom Co.'s accounts?" David cleared his throat nervously. It's an investment for the future of the company. An investment in an empty office in Canary Wharf. I challenged, watching David's face pale. "Who is Oliver Kent? David? Is that your alter ego for your fraudulent transactions?" David's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no words coming out. His face had lost all color, his confidence crumbling under the weight of his exposed lies. "How did you find out?" He finally managed to say, "I'm a technology man, David. Data is my thing. Did you really think you could deceive me so easily? That I wouldn't notice the discrepancies in our accounts, the mysterious company receiving large sums without providing any services?" David's eyes darted to Emma, as if seeking support, but she was staring at the floor, tears streaming down her face. "And you," I turned to Emma, the hurt in my voice palpable despite my attempt to remain composed. You were in on this from the beginning, weren't you? That's why you suddenly took an interest in the company, why you wanted shares in your name. It was all part of the plan. Emma looked up, her eyes red with tears. Robert, please. Save it. I cut her off. I don't want to hear any more lies. You've both said enough. I turned to leave the room, unable to bear the sight of them any longer. But before I could reach the door, David spoke up, his voice desperate. What are you going to do? I paused, my back to them. I think that's obvious, isn't it? I'm going to ensure that you both face the consequences of your actions, legally and otherwise. You can't do that, David protested. You'd be destroying the company, everything we built. I turned to face him, my expression hard. No, David, you've already done that. You destroyed at the moment you decided to betray me, to steal from the company, to sleep with my wife. Robert, please, Emma pleaded, tears still streaming down her face. We can work this out. We can find a solution that doesn't hurt the company. There is no we anymore, Emma, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. As of this moment, I'm divorcing you. And as for TechnoVision, I will not let your actions destroy what I built. I addressed them both, my voice steely with resolve. I don't want to talk to either of you right now. We'll communicate through my lawyer from now on. For now, I want you both gone. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. When I return tomorrow, I expect this apartment to be empty. With that, I left the room, not waiting for their response. I packed a small bag with essentials, grabbed my laptop, and walked out of the apartment without looking back. The weight of the betrayal was crushing, but beneath the pain, a cold determination was forming. They had tried to destroy me, but they had failed, and now they would learn that I was not someone to be crossed. The following days were a blur of activity. I moved into a suite at the Regency Hotel, a discreet establishment known for its privacy and discretion. I needed a place to regroup, to plan my next moves without the emotional turmoil of seeing everyday items that reminded me of Emma. My first call was to Michael Thompson, my personal lawyer and a trusted friend. I had already alerted him that something was brewing, but now I laid out the full extent of the betrayal. Michael listened without interruption, his face growing grimmer as I detailed the embezzlement scheme and the personal betrayal. "This is serious, Robert," he said when I had finished. "We're talking about significant fraud here, not to mention the personal aspects. We need to move quickly to protect your interests." Over the next few days, Michael and I worked tirelessly to build a case. I provided him with all the evidence I had gathered, the financial records showing the transfers to Freedom Co., the photographs of the empty office, the documentation from Marcus proving that the money was ultimately ending up in David's personal account. Meanwhile, I continued to go to work, maintaining a semblance of normalcy even as my world was crumbling around me. David had taken a sudden vacation, claiming a family emergency. I let the lie stand, not ready to confront him publicly yet. The less he knew about my actions, the better. I was careful not to tip my hand, not to reveal to anyone at the company what I had discovered. The fewer people who knew, the less chance there was of word getting back to David or Emma. A week after the confrontation, I received a formal communication from a law firm representing both David and Emma. They were proposing a settlement. David would sell his shares in the company to me at a fair market value to be determined by an independent valuation, and Emma would relinquish a 10% stake for a reasonable compensation. I read the letter with a bitter laugh. They were trying to cash out, to get as much as they could before the fraud was exposed. But they had severely miscalculated if they thought I would agree to this. I forwarded the letter to Michael, who contacted the law firm immediately. His message was clear. There would be no settlements, no deals. We were pursuing legal action for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. The legal battle began in earnest. David and Emma's lawyers filed a countersuit, claiming that I had been mismanaging the company, that the transfers to Freedom Co. were legitimate business expenses that I had approved, and that I was now trying to force them out because of personal issues. It was an ugly battle, with accusations flying from both sides. The stress was immense, but I found strength in my resolve. I was fighting not just for my company, but for justice, for vindication against those who had betrayed me. In the midst of this legal storm, I received an unexpected call from William Foster, the head of the investment group that had provided the $20 million to TechnoVision. "Robert," William's deep voice came through the phone. "I've been hearing some disturbing rumors about what's happening at TechnoVision. I thought it would be best to hear directly from you." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. The investment was crucial for the company's growth, and I couldn't afford to lose the confidence of our investors. But I also couldn't lie or downplay the situation. "William," I began, opting for honesty, "I appreciate you reaching out. There is indeed a situation at TechnoVision. My business partner, David Miller, has been embezzling company funds through a shell company. This is currently being investigated, and legal action is being taken." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I see," William finally said. "And how does this affect the company's operations and our investment?" "The company continues to operate as normal," I assured him. "The product development is on track, and customer service has not been affected. I've personally taken over the financial controls to ensure there are no further irregularities. The $20 million investment is secure and is being used as outlined in our agreement." Another pause. "I appreciate your candor, Robert. I would like to meet with you in person to discuss this further. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I agreed, and the next day, I found myself in William's plush office, explaining the situation in more detail. I showed him the evidence I had gathered, explained the legal actions being taken, and outlined my plans to secure the company's future. William listened attentively, asking pointed questions about the financial implications and the potential impact on TechnoVision's reputation. When I had finished, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Robert," he said after a long moment, "I've been in business for over 30 years. I've seen all kinds of betrayals, all kinds of scandals. What matters to me is not that they happen, because they do, that's human nature, but how they are handled. I'm impressed with your approach. You're protecting,